There are things that should stay buried. Not in the ground. The ground gives things back eventually. But buried in locked chests, in the back rooms of dead women's houses, in the estates of great-aunts, no one visited, and no one truly knew. Vera Calloway died on a Thursday in November, and the lawyer said there was almost nothing of value. Almost. There was a music box wrapped in black velvet at the bottom of a chest that had been nailed shut, not locked, nailed, with 6 iron nails driven deep into the wood. The estate attorney noted in his report that when they pried the lid open, the temperature in the room dropped by 11 degrees. He wrote it down. He thought it was worth writing down. And then, because no one told him what it meant, he sent the box to the Mercer family along with a lamp, a writing desk, and 14 boxes of books no one would ever read. It arrived on a Tuesday. By Wednesday night, it had already begun. The Mercer house sat at the edge of Harrow Lake, a name that should have told them something, if names told you anything, which they sometimes do. Claire Mercer unpacked the box from its shipping materials on the kitchen table, while Daniel made coffee and Ellie sat doing homework at the counter, and little Nora watched from the doorway with her bare feet on the cold tile and her eyes very wide and very still. Claire unwrapped the velvet, and there it was. Dark lacquered wood, almost black, inlaid with a pattern of water lilies in pale bone, or what she assumed was bone. A small brass key on a ribbon, a glass panel on the top through which you could see the mechanism inside, a spiked brass cylinder, a steel comb, a coiled spring wound very tight. It was beautiful the way old things are beautiful, with a heaviness to it, a sense that it had absorbed every room it had ever sat in. Claire wound the key 3 turns, lifted the lid, and a lullaby came out. 6 notes, repeating. She didn't recognize it. Daniel didn't recognize it. Ellie looked up from her homework and said it was pretty, and Nora, still standing in the doorway, said nothing at all. She was already smiling. The first night, Claire woke at 3 in the morning to the sound of the lullaby drifting up through the floorboards. 6 notes, repeating. She lay still for a moment the way you do when your brain hasn't caught up to the wrongness yet, and then she was out of bed and on the stairs before she'd decided to move. The music box was on the kitchen counter where she'd left it. The lid was open. She was certain, completely, bone-deep certain, that she had closed it before she went to bed. She closed it now. The music stopped. She stood in the cold kitchen for a long time, telling herself the latch was faulty, that old mechanisms sometimes released on their own, that there was nothing wrong. She was good at telling herself things. It was a skill she'd developed slowly over a long marriage. She went back upstairs. She checked on the girls. Ellie was asleep, one arm thrown over her face. Nora's room was dark and quiet, but when Claire crossed to Nora's bed to pull the blanket up, the small habit of a mother, she saw that Nora's feet were damp. The soles of her feet were damp and faintly muddy, and her face in sleep had that same serene expression, that same almost smile, as if whatever she was dreaming was exactly what she wanted. By the 4th night, it wasn't just Nora. Daniel was found at the back door at 3:14 in the morning, hand on the knob, eyes open but seeing nothing. Claire shook him, and he came back slowly, the way you come back from a very deep place, blinking and confused and insisting he'd only been getting a glass of water. Ellie heard the music from her room and wrote about it in her journal. She'd started a journal, which in retrospect was the first sign she knew something was wrong without being able to say it. She wrote, "The song goes in through your ears and you feel it in your chest, and then your feet want to go somewhere. I put my pillow over my head. I don't think Nora does that." 3 nights later, Claire found the back door standing open at 4 in the morning, and Nora's bedroom empty. She ran. The grass was wet with dew, and the lake was a black mirror at the edge of the yard, and Nora was standing at the shore in her white nightgown with her toes in the water, and her arms at her sides, and her face turned towards something in the middle of the lake that Claire could not see. Claire screamed her daughter's name. Nora turned around slowly, as though she was finishing a conversation, and walked back up the lawn without a word. She said she'd been dreaming. She said it was a very nice dream. She asked if they could keep the music box forever. Claire put the music box in the garage the next morning, wrapped it in the black velvet, put it in a box, put the box on the highest shelf. That night the music played from the garage, drifting through the walls at exactly 3 o'clock, thin and sweet and relentless. She brought it back inside because somehow that was worse. The thought of Nora walking out to the garage in the dark, drawn toward that shelf. She started looking into it instead. She was a woman who dealt with things by understanding them. It was what made her a good nurse and a difficult wife and, she hoped, a careful mother. She found the maker's mark stamped in brass on the underside of the box. H. Aldrich and Son, Instrumental Makers, Boston, 1887. She found H. Aldrich in a digitized trade directory, a craftsman of some reputation, it said, specializing in custom mechanical instruments and automata. And then, in a footnote she almost missed, Aldrich's workshop closed in 1891, following the disappearance of his son, age 8, from the banks of the Charles River. The boy's body was never recovered. Among Aldrich's final commissions was a series of 12 custom music boxes, each playing an original composition. The article didn't say what happened to the 12 boxes. It didn't need to. Claire already felt the shape of it. She found 7 of the 12 boxes in historical records. It took her 4 days she should have spent sleeping. Each box had passed through multiple families over the century and a half since its making. She didn't find all of them. The trail went cold in some places, names changed, records burned, or were lost. But of the 7 she could trace with certainty, she found this. Every family that had kept a box for more than 2 weeks had lost a child. Not to illness, not to accident, to water. A boy in Providence, 1903, a girl in Hartford, 1921. Twin brothers in Rochester who walked into the Genesee River on a February night when the temperature was 12 degrees, still in their pajamas, and were found downstream 2 days later holding hands. The ages ranged from 4 to 11. The circumstances were always the same. A parent who heard music in the night and was too slow, and in every case in the newspaper archives and the court records and the coroner's reports, there was a detail so consistent it couldn't be coincidence. Every child was found with the same expression, every single one. Peaceful, almost smiling, as if the water was somewhere they had very much wanted to go. She called the estate attorney on a Thursday. She asked him what he knew about Vera's life. Not the assets, not the inventory, but the life. He was quiet for a moment before he said that Vera Calloway had lived alone for 62 years, and that, in his professional opinion, she had been frightened of something for most of them. He'd assumed it was the usual late-life anxieties. He understood now he had been wrong. He told her about the chest, not just that it had been nailed shut. He had mentioned that already. But what was written on the inside of the lid in Vera's handwriting, which he'd seen when they pried it open and which he had decided not to include in the estate report because he hadn't known what to do with it? Claire asked him what it said. He read it to her over the phone. It said, "Do not wind the key." It said, "She comes with the music." It said, "I have kept her hungry for 30 years, and it has cost me everything, and if you are reading this, I am sorry because I was not brave enough to destroy it, and I did not know how." At the bottom, underlined 3 times in ink that had bled through the wood, "She wants the young ones. She is always thirsty." Claire looked at the music box on the kitchen counter. The lid was open. She did not remember opening it. She locked Nora's door. She locked the back door and the front door, and she put the keys under her pillow, and she sat at the kitchen table with the music box in front of her, and she waited. At 2:58 she heard Nora moving in her room, a soft shuffling, and then a sound that Claire would hear in her sleep for the rest of her life. Small fingers working the door handle from the inside with a patience that was not childlike, that was not Nora, that was something else wearing Nora's hands. The music started at precisely 3, 6 notes, repeating. Claire stood up. She was going to do something. She had a plan. She had told herself she had a plan. And then she looked at the back door, and the key was not under her pillow because she was standing in the kitchen, and she didn't remember coming downstairs, and the back door was standing open, and cold, wet air was moving through the house, and the music was playing, and Nora's door was open, and Nora's bed was empty. She ran. She ran across the wet grass in her bare feet, screaming Nora's name, and the lake was black and still, and the mist was low and moving, and there at the edge of the water was Nora, walking in, the white of her nightgown swallowed inch by inch, and standing in the water beside her, holding her hand, was a shape that was almost a child, almost a girl, its hair streaming wet, and its face turned toward Claire with a smile that had nothing in it that had ever been alive. Claire hit the water. She grabbed Nora's arm. She pulled. And the thing in the water held on. She pulled hard enough to fall backward, hard enough to pull something in her shoulder that wouldn't fully heal for 2 years. Nora came free of the water with a sound like a held breath released, a soft, resigned exhale. And they fell together on the muddy shore, Claire's arms locked around her daughter so tight that Nora later said it hurt, which was fine, which was perfectly fine. Daniel was there suddenly, and Ellie, and there was shouting and crying, and Nora was shivering and confused and asking why she was wet and why her feet were cold. She did not remember walking to the lake. She did not remember the music. When Claire looked back at the water, the shape was gone. The surface was still. The mist moved in slow, indifferent patterns, as if nothing had happened, as if the lake had simply declined to take what it had been offered this time, and filed the matter away for later. In the morning, Daniel drove the music box 40 miles and threw it into a river. Not a lake, he was specific about that. A river. Moving water. He'd read somewhere that moving water was different. Claire didn't know if he was right. She was standing on the back porch watching Nora in the yard when she heard Nora start to hum. 6 notes, repeating. Claire was across the yard before she knew she'd moved. Nora looked up, startled, and said she didn't know where she'd heard it. She said she'd just had it stuck in her head. They moved in the spring. Claire had wanted to move the morning after the lake, but Daniel took 3 months to accept what had happened in a way that allowed him to act on it, which was how Daniel worked, and she had learned to give him the time. The new house had no lake, no pond, not even a drainage ditch. She checked. They did not talk about what had happened in a way that satisfied anyone. Nora stopped humming after the first week in the new house, and Claire allowed herself, slowly and carefully, to breathe. She kept in contact with the estate attorney. She felt she owed him that. She wanted to know if anyone traced the other boxes, the other 11. He found 3 more in the following year. 2 had already passed through families who couldn't be located. One was sitting in an antique shop in Portland, Maine, priced at $45 with a small handwritten card that said, "Lovely Victorian music box, working mechanism, lullaby melody, one of a kind." She called the shop. She asked them to destroy it. They said they'd think about it. She called back 6 times. On the 7th call, the number was disconnected. She searched for news from Portland for 6 months after that. She found what she was afraid she'd find in a local paper in October, a small item, not front page, about a family in Portland who had experienced a terrible tragedy. A child. The water. The parents described the child's expression, and the reporter had included the detail because it seemed important somehow, Seemed like the kind of thing you wrote down. Peaceful, the parents said. She looked almost like she was smiling, like she was somewhere she'd very much wanted to be.